In the quiet, hidden village of Ekanbi, surrounded by thick forests and whispering winds, a baby girl named Atena was born on a cold night. But joy turned to sorrow in a heartbeat. Her mother died, giving her life. From that very moment, Atena's world began in silence and sadness. Her father, heartbroken but desperate, remarried soon after. He brought home a woman named Nyasha, hoping she would help rebuild the family. But Nyasha's heart was not soft. It was cold, like the ice on the northern mountains, and it held no love for Atena. To Nyasha, Atena was not a child. She was a reminder of the woman who came before her, of a love she could never replace. From the first day, she looked at Atena like she was a curse. No kind words, no gentle hands, only harsh stares and cruel commands. The little girl, too small to understand, simply stayed quiet. But the village, they saw it. They heard the tone in Nyasha's voice, saw Atena's bruised spirit. Still, they said nothing. In Ekanbi, silence was tradition. No one interfered. No one questioned another's home. And so Atena grew, not with laughter, but with loneliness. Not with warmth, but with whispers behind closed doors. She didn't know why she was hated. She only knew the sharp bite of Nyasha's coldness and the aching absence of a mother's love. But even as sadness wrapped around her like winter fog, something inside Atena refused to break. There was a quiet strength in her, a spark, one that even Nyasha's cruelty couldn't put out. Not yet. Nyasha tried to smile at first, but every time she looked at Atena, the smile cracked. The child's clear eyes, her soft laugh, even the way the sun caught her hair, all of it felt like a mirror, showing Nyasha what she would never be. That sting of jealousy started small, like a tiny coal in winter ash. But each day, as Atena's father praised his daughter's gentle spirit, the coal flared hotter. Soon it raged like wildfire inside Nyasha's chest, burning away any trace of kindness she might have had. So she made Atena's world smaller and colder. Breakfast? A crust of stale bread, if Atena was lucky. Warm clothes, only threadbare rags that let the wind bite her skin. While other children played near the river, Atena hauled heavy buckets, chopped wood with blistered hands, and scrubbed floors until her knees turned raw. Nyasha watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a slow, cruel smile tugging at her lips. Each tear Atena wiped away felt like a victory, but jealousy is greedy. It always wants more. One moonless night, long after everyone was asleep, Nyasha stood by the dying fire. Shadows flickered across the walls like restless spirits. She whispered to them, soft, dangerous words that tasted of iron and hate. "I know how to end this," she breathed, her voice almost a hiss. The plan formed in those dark hours, sharp as a wolf's tooth, and with each whispered promise, the wildfire in her heart blazed higher, hungry for Atena's final silence. One cold afternoon, Nyasha called out to Atena, with a strange sweetness in her voice. "Come, child," she said. "We need firewood for the night." Atena hesitated. Nyasha never invited her anywhere, but she followed, holding on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, her stepmother was finally being kind. They walked deep into the forest, past the familiar paths, where the trees grew thicker and the light grew dim. The air turned colder. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Nyasha led her to Denya Ridge, a place every villager feared. It was where the wolves roamed, wild, sharp-toothed, and hungry. Atena's heart started pounding. She looked up at her stepmother, confused, but before she could speak, Nyasha's face changed. The fake warmth vanished. She pulled out a rope, rough and scratchy, and before Atena could run, she was tied tightly to a tree. Her small wrists burned from the rope as she struggled. "Why are you doing this?" Atena cried, her voice shaking. Nyasha leaned in close, her eyes dark with something cruel. "The wolves will feast tonight," she whispered, her lips curling into a smile that made the wind freeze. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her footsteps crunching on the frost-covered ground. Atena screamed, again and again, but only the cold wind answered. The forest stood silent, shadows stretched longer, and somewhere far off, a howl broke through the silence. Night slowly swallowed the forest, turning every tree into a tall, dark shadow. The wind grew colder, sharper, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Atena sat tied to the tree, her small body shaking from fear and cold. Her tears had dried on her cheeks, leaving salty trails. Every crack of a twig made her flinch. Every rustle in the bushes made her heart race. Then, somewhere in the distance, a long, low howl rose into the air. One wolf, then another, closer, louder, surrounding her. She froze. Her breath hitched. And then, eyes. Dozens of them, glowing yellow in the darkness. They moved slowly, quietly, circling the tree. Her chest tightened. She closed her eyes and whispered a shaky goodbye to the world. But the attack never came. Instead, something strange happened. One by one, the wolves stepped closer, not with growls, but with calm, slow steps. Their bodies low, ears forward, curious. The biggest one, a massive grey alpha with eyes like silver fire, walked right up to her. Atena squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for teeth, but instead, a nudge, gentle, like a friend waking another from a dream. The alpha tilted its head, as if trying to understand her. Then quietly, the wolves lay down around her, like a warm wall of fur and breath. One even rested its head near her feet. They didn't want to hurt her. They wanted to protect her. The forest, once filled with fear, now felt like it was watching something ancient and powerful unfold. It didn't make sense, but somehow it felt right. In the village of Ekanbi, old people used to whisper stories by firelight, stories of a child chosen by nature, a child so pure and wild that even beasts would bow to her. Most thought it was just a tale, something to keep children wide-eyed at night, but deep in the forest, that story was coming to life. The wolves didn't just spare Atena, they accepted her. They saw something in her, something not human, not animal, but something in between. Maybe it was the sadness in her eyes, or the quiet strength in her heart. Maybe the forest itself had chosen her. Whatever it was, the wolves treated her like one of their own. They brought her food, small animals, berries, whatever they could find. They stayed close at night, their thick fur warming her frozen skin. The alpha never left her side, watching her like a protector, like a brother. At first, Atena was scared, but slowly, the fear melted. She started to understand their sounds, their movements, even their silence. She learned how to walk with them, how to listen to the trees, how to feel the rhythm of the wild in her chest. Each day, she grew stronger. Her eyes shone brighter. Her steps became lighter, faster, like she belonged to the earth beneath her feet. The cold couldn't touch her. The loneliness no longer haunted her. She was still the girl without a mother, but now she had something else. A family, a pack, and a bond that no one could break. Back in the village, Nyasha returned alone, her face twisted in fake panic. She stumbled into the courtyard, crying loud, messy tears that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Atena," she sobbed. "She ran into the woods and never came back." Her voice shook just enough to seem real, but her heart was steady, cold, and untouched by sorrow. The villagers gathered, their eyes wide with shock. Atena was just a child. How could she survive the forest alone? Atena's father fell to his knees, hands covering his face, his grief pouring out in silence. He didn't ask questions. He didn't wonder why Nyasha had taken her out in the first place. His pain clouded everything. Nyasha wrapped her arms around him, pretending to comfort him, pretending to cry. And in a village where silence was stronger than truth, no one dared to challenge her, not out loud. But whispers began to grow like weeds in a forgotten garden. Some remembered seeing the coldness in Nyasha's eyes. Others noticed the way she flinched when someone said Atena's name. Nothing was proven, but the air around Nyasha started to change, heavier, watchful. At night, when the fire burned low, guilt crept into her dreams like smoke under a locked door. She began to see glowing eyes in the dark corners of her room. She heard howls in the wind, even when the sky was still. Nyasha thought she had buried her secret deep in the forest, but the forest never forgets. Weeks passed. The village tried to move on, but something about Atena's disappearance didn't sit right. Then one morning, a hunter named Kojo returned from Denya Ridge, his face pale, his hands shaking. He dropped his bow at the edge of the village and ran straight to the chief's house. "She's alive," he said, breathless. "I saw her, with wolves." Everyone froze. "What do you mean with wolves?" someone asked, half laughing, thinking it was a wild mistake. But Kojo's eyes told a different story. "I followed a strange trail, human footprints beside wolf prints. Then I saw her, Atena, standing between them like she belonged there. She didn't look scared. She looked free." His voice cracked. like even he couldn't believe what he had seen. The villagers murmured in disbelief. Some rolled their eyes. Others looked to Nyasha, who suddenly went stiff and quiet. But then Kojo pulled something from his satchel, an old, torn scarf, frayed at the edges, stained with dirt but unmistakable. It was Atena's, the same scarf her mother had sewn for her, the one she wore every day. Gasps filled the air. The chief, who had known Atena since she was born, stood up with fire in his eyes. "Prepare a search party," he said firmly. "We go to Denya Ridge at first light." The truth had cracked through the silence, and this time the village would listen. At sunrise, the villagers stepped into the forest, hearts pounding and eyes sharp. The trees felt taller, the shadows darker. They walked in silence, led by Kojo, until they reached Denya Ridge, the place no one dared go unless they had to. Then, through the thick mist, someone gasped. There she was, Atena. But she wasn't the same girl they remembered. She stood barefoot on a rock, her hair wild and tangled, her eyes sharp and glowing with something fierce and powerful. Around her, the wolves gathered like guardians, their bodies tense, growling low at the strangers who dared enter their world. One wrong move, and it would have been over. But Atena didn't run. She didn't speak. She simply raised her hand, calm, steady, unafraid. And like magic, the wolves fell silent. The growling stopped. The air shifted. Even the forest seemed to pause, watching her. Her father stepped forward, eyes wide, lips trembling. He dropped to his knees, tears falling before he could stop them. "My child," he whispered, broken with both guilt and wonder. But Nyasha stood frozen, her face pale as snow. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Everything she had buried in lies was now alive, standing tall, stronger than ever. Atena looked at her, not with hate, but with a wild, ancient calm. She had survived what was meant to destroy her, and she hadn't just survived. She had become something more. Nature hadn't taken Atena, it had chosen her. Atena finally spoke, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the heavy silence like a sharp blade. She told the village everything, how Nyasha had led her into the forest, tied her to a tree, and left her for the wolves. Every lie Nyasha had told was shattered in that moment, broken like fragile glass. The villagers listened, some with tears, others with anger burning in their eyes. The truth was clear, and there was no going back. Nyasha's face twisted with fear and shame. She tried to speak, to deny, but no one believed her anymore. The chief stood tall and declared her punishment. Nyasha would be banished to the very forest where she had tried to destroy Atena, alone, with only the trees and shadows for company. It was a sentence harsher than any law could give, but the village believed nature would deliver its own justice. Days passed. Nyasha wandered through the forest, hoping for mercy, for some sign that the wolves might come to her side. But the wolves, those fierce protectors of Atena, never came near her. The forest stayed silent, cold and empty around her. Nature had turned its back on Nyasha, leaving her lost and alone, a punishment far worse than any prison. The villagers understood then that justice wasn't always found in words or rules. Sometimes it came from the earth itself, the wild, fierce heart of the forest that protected the innocent and punished the cruel. And Atena, she stood as a living proof that truth, strength, and the spirit of nature could never be broken. Atena didn't leave the forest or the village after everything that happened. Instead, she stayed, stronger and wiser than before. She wasn't a scared girl anymore, but a protector. The villagers saw it too. They watched how the wolves followed her like loyal friends, and how she moved with a quiet power that felt like the forest itself. Slowly, they started to call her the daughter of the wolves. Her story spread through Ekanbi like wildfire, not as a tale of fear, but as one of hope and strength. Parents told their children about Atena's courage, how she survived when everyone thought she would be lost forever. They spoke of how nature chose her, not by blood or family, but by the fire in her spirit. She became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest times, something fierce and beautiful can rise. Generations passed, and Atena's name lived on, not as the girl who was left alone, but as the legend who turned pain into power. The village of Ekanbi never forgot her, the girl who was once bait for wolves but became their queen, their guardian, and their hope.